Joining a professional body has never been more important. Join thousands of other professionals just like you who are getting ahead with CIHT membership. Go to the CIHT website and discover exclusive resources and why the leaders and future leaders of the sector are members with CIHT.
Welcome to CIHT Podcasts.
Welcome to a fascinating story about the building of a national road agency in post-apartheid South Africa, featuring an interview with Nazir Alli, the person at the centre of this, the founding CEO of SANRAL, the South African National Roads Agency Limited. This is a story about leadership, about innovation, evolution, from the development of road tolling to the first country in the world with an electronic tolling collection system. Welcome to Transport Talks from CIHT. I'm your host, Justin Ward, and this is the first part of a two-part episode featuring a conversation I had with Nazir. The second episode focuses on the World Road Association, PIARC. So let's go over to the interview. I'd like to sort of start with your background. I think let's start maybe in the UK where you studied, and then we'll take it from there up to the point where you were appointed as CEO of SANRAL. So if you could just give a sense of where you've come to the sector, that'd be really good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Justin, and thanks to you and the CIHT for this opportunity to do this webcast. It's an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I hope that you're not going to end up being disappointed with my stories. But no, look, I'm always thankful to the UK, simply because I spent what one would term as my formative years in the UK, having gone to school there to do my A-levels and then gone on to do university. And my earlier career started off in the UK as well as a civil engineer. I went to Plymouth University of Plymouth. And then, of course, I started to work and used to work at the London Borough of Ealing. Yeah. And it was quite an exciting time to be working in the London Borough at that time of Ealing, simply because the UK itself was going through its changes in terms of, setting up their own sort of at arm's length agencies as well. There was a talk about the Highways Agency at the time, but also the construction units that the government used to sort of run and manage on their own. They were starting to be divested from there and becoming independent. In fact, one of my classmates used to work for them, and he was one of them who started off when they became independent as well. But now memory's gone dim, and I forget which one of the 4 units that he was involved in. So it was quite an exciting time, as I said, to be there in the UK at that time, in terms of seeing the changes of management styles within government coming in. And so that, I believe, is what sort of led on to an international change in really looking at how governments actually deliver their services, etc., and perhaps become much more relevant or much more efficient in terms of delivering services to the citizens. Yeah. And thereafter, I came back to South Africa simply because, I wanted to come and help in terms of building a new South Africa, which was quite a challenge, having to work in an environment where people like myself or people of who were disenfranchised at the time in South Africa, and I'm talking about the 80s now, we only became enfranchised, or I should say we got the vote only in 1994, after the demise of apartheid itself. So it wasn't easy working in South Africa at that time, simply because you weren't allowed to be a manager of white people and managing. Now, you know how it works in our industry. You got to manage a whole lot of people of different skill sets, and of course, a very diverse group of people that you got to manage. So that was technically a problem. But I must say the company I worked for, it was an issue. It was not an issue with them at all. They made sure that, if I was in charge of a project, I was a project manager, project leader, whatever they called us at that stage, and you had to make sure that the project was delivered on time and within budget. And the same experience I had when I went to work out on site. Yeah. I started off life as an assistant resident engineer on one of the large water projects in South Africa, what we call the pump storage scheme. It was a pump storage scheme down in the Cape, and I was the only sort of disenfranchised engineer sitting there, of color, in the senior level. And it took quite a while, I noticed, for the other people to understand, man, this is the guy. I'll give you an example that as I got this thing, advanced in my career, I used to go to site meetings, yeah, but I was the engineer in terms of the documentation, etc. And the contractors and everybody else were not my colleagues. We used to wait for the engineer to arrive. Because they knew, they looked at me, they said, no, this guy can't be the guys, from the consulting engineering company. So there must be somebody else coming in, a white person coming in. And then it would suddenly dawn on them. They'd say, hey, there's nobody else coming over. So this guy must be, we better sit down and start the meeting. And it took a while for the industries to also to understand as to where we're coming from, etc. So that was basically the background. And then, of course, came 1994, this great euphoria around 1994. We were all of us were happy. And I sincerely believe that it was both across all the sectors within South Africa, all the races within South Africa, of all colors and hues in South Africa, they were very happy to see the end of apartheid. Because suddenly people they realize that there was a large pool of skills in that we were not utilizing, for the benefit of the country. So I was one day working, of course, in this firm of consulting engineers, one of the largest firms in South Africa, in South Africa. And the next day, I joined the Department of Transport with a mandate to say, you got to create the agency. And this was in 1995 that I joined the department. January 95, I started work at the department. And that transition as well was also very difficult to deal with initially because I went in as a chief director, and our hierarchy system is very similar to the UK in terms of you have a DG, then you have a DDG, Deputy Director General, and then you have all these different chief directors, and we were chief director roads, and suddenly I get parachuted into the chief director roads with other people because my predecessor over there had resigned, had left the thing. So there was a vacancy, and I applied for the job. Maybe foolishly, I don't know, but I did apply for the job, and I was successful in the job. Cut a long story short, I'll just give you one little anecdote. In those days, my hair used to stand out this way, literally like a real afro. I don't know originally. I walk into this office and people looked at me to say, who's this new guy coming in and suddenly being the boss over here with his hair looking like that? So on every Mondays, my colleagues used to have a meeting, a group meeting about what's happening, etc. And I never interfered as to how things were structured within the department. I thought I need to first find out, who's for who and how things are managed over here. And I used to attend quietly this Monday meeting. So one Monday, they all came with a haircut. There was a message they were giving me. The following Monday, I came with a haircut even shorter than theirs. Just to give them the message as to how we work over here around over there. It's not about the looks, etc., as long as the quality of the service that you provide. And eventually, I won't forget this, it was September of 1995. One of my former colleagues came to me and shook my hand and says, we tried very hard to work you out of this position. And I said, well, folks, I'm here to stay. Not only I'm here to stay, let me tell you what my mandate is. We're going to become an agency, a semi-corporate, a corporatized agency of government over there. And those who want to go with me will go into this agency, but we will not be civil servants either. So you guys got to make up your mind amongst yourselves whether you want to go with me or do you want to stay behind. And that was the turning point. That was a turning point with my former colleagues, etc. And of course, we had various discussions around in the agency and so forth. And eventually we agreed that, yes, we will become an agency. But there was always, of course, this mandate that I had from the minister to say there will be an agency in 1998, and this was 1995. So we had a lot of discussions amongst ourselves. And the one thing we decided for ourselves that we will not hire an external party. to tell us as to how the agency should be structured and what we should be doing in the agency and what we shouldn't be doing. Because we amongst us agreed that this is our lives which are going to be affected. I mean, I was new. I didn't have a long history in the civil service in South Africa. But my colleagues who've been there, some of them for over 20 years. And there were certain sort of perks of the job which goes in the civil service, which, we were asking them to give up on. And 91 of them joined me, and we formed the agency in 1998. Of course, there was a lot of consultations around there, both with civil society at large and within government itself. But the government consultation, etc., was dealt with by the DG and, of course, our minister. But when it came to civil society consultation and your industry that we were working with, all of those consultations took place between myself, my colleagues, together with the DG, sometimes and sometimes not without the DG, where we were telling them as to what we think we will be able to do. And when we set up the agency and the relationships that we wanted to build up with civil society, but especially with industry, both to the contracting side and with the consulting engineering side. This was completely new in South Africa, a new style of management, a style of breaking away from government. And again, not everybody was supportive of that within government and outside of government, especially at the provincial level. And the reason at the provincial level, it was that traditionally all the work, the maintenance work on the national roads was done by the provinces. And as we were going in the 3 years that I was in the department, I already started to wean them off from the department over there, because we used to ask them, for instance, to show us in terms of how do you cost, fixing a guardrail or fixing a pothole or whatever it is that they had to do. And they could never give us a breakdown of the numbers. But it was simply a transfer of a sum of money, because it was all done amongst friends in the past. So here comes this new guy and he says, no, you've got to justify your earning with us. Tell us as to how we're spending our money. That didn't go down well with the provinces. And there was opposition from the provinces to setting up the agency, because they realized that we're becoming sort of semi-independent from government, and suddenly we will have to account for all the work that we do and be held responsible for it. And there was going to be a different business style or business method, and that they will have to justify if they want to do the work. And of course, we already started to think at that time of introducing where consulting engineers had to tender for their work as well. Now, traditionally in South Africa, consulting engineers did not tender for their work like contractors did in every other service provider. And we, within the agency, with my colleagues, we had a different view. We said, no, why should they be treated different, consulting engineers? And that's the understanding that I've come all my life working as a consulting engineer in South Africa. And it couldn't be business as usual. We had to do things there. And we introduced that. So come April 1998, having the legislation which has been passed, etc., and we had our own act, the South African National Roads Agency Limited Act of 1998. That became so. Once that became, then we had to, set up our own. And the two things that one needs to note about this. One is that we had a board which was like any other company in the private sector as well, which was appointed by the shareholder. Okay. The board was appointed by the shareholder, like anybody else over there, but the CEO, etc., was appointed by the board. And one of the conditions of my appointment at that time with the board was very simple. I had to go and do a specialized course on how to be a director of a company. It's probably one of the most useful courses I've done in my life, I must say. It was a 6 months course, with an exam and everything else in there. So I did that as well. And that was only after the results that I was successful on that I was confirmed as a CEO of SANRAL. So it wasn't just to say that because you were chief director, that you immediately became CEO of SANRAL. There was a condition attached to that. And it was an exciting time for us as SANRAL, because we had to turn around and establish our own structures, the manner in which we worked. And one of the things that we agreed amongst ourselves, and I must say the senior people that I was working with, my senior colleagues, is that we will not have a traditional organogram. We did not have a traditional organogram. Yeah. And we decided that the salaries, etc., will be performance-based. Yeah, it will be linked with performance, with the indicators, etc. But we also agreed that the performance that the indicators that we were going to use, right? Yeah, that the person who we're going to be assessing must be able to influence the outcome of that. If they could not influence the outcome of that indicator, then that was not a good indicator to apply to that particular person. That's what the big thing that was the one. Secondly, the board had in what they call a compact, but it's a contract between the minister and the board. So we agreed on an annual basis as to what we would deliver for the 12 months. But our planning was done on a 5-year cycle. But within government itself, the planning is done over a 3-year cycle in terms of what they term the medium-term expenditure framework. So at least we knew that we could plan over a 3-year to fit in with the government cycle on the 3-year cycle itself, but we'd only know as to what our allocation was for budgetary allocation from government come February every year. But at least we could plan on a 3-year cycle. But there were two parts to our business. Yeah. The one part was that we had non-toll roads and we had toll roads. And on the toll roads, SANRAL had the ability or the powers to go and borrow in their own right, but within certain limits. The limits were set in by the minister and the Ministry of Finance. Yeah, that's where the limits were set in terms of what we can borrow, and our legislation was very, very clear. We could only borrow for roads that were self-funding. If the road was not self-funding, then we could not borrow. But we're not in the short term. We worked on a 30-year horizon to say that over this period of years that we can do that. And like any the PPPs has become the big thing, or PFI as they call it in the UK now, yeah. But we use the same criteria in terms of whether we would toll a road or not, financial requirements in terms of the various debt service cover ratios, etc. But the only advantage that we had is that we could promote a project with a debt service cover ratio of 1 or 0.8. But if we were going to promote a project, a toll road, with a debt service cover ratio of 0.8, we had to make sure that, or I shouldn't say make sure, we had to be confident enough that the risk we're taking by not having a debt service cover ratio of 1 will be covered within a span of 3 years. That will come back to 1. But we could only do that if there were other very good social reasons. So it weren't just economic reasons that we were looking at there, yeah, but we had to look at other social reasons as well to go ahead and promote a project which had a debt service cover ratio as 1. And within the toll road portfolio, we had two parts to that as well. There were the projects that we funded ourselves. They said we issued bonds in the market under the name of SANRAL. That's what we did. And some of the bonds had a sovereign guarantee, and there were other bonds which did not have a sovereign guarantee. We were doing it on our balance sheet. But we also did the PPPs, where we had concessions as well. So there were the two parts to the toll roads. And one of the very first PPP that we did was the Maputo Development Corridor. It's one project across 2 jurisdictions. And that was a very exciting project to do as well, simply because you had to first sort out the legal parameters in terms of the contract, how that will work, etc., and what is the processes that the one would follow if, for instance, there's a dispute on the Mozambican side and not on the South African side. And this was always done as one project. same standards across the two borders, same applications, the manner in which we negotiate as far as the tariffs and that were concerned, the same principles applied. It wasn't one principle in Mozambique and another principle. And I'm happy to say, I think it's got about 5 or 6 years to go of the 30-year concession period we signed. I remember I used to tell people, man, I'm signing away the future of my grandchildren over here. But Justin, it's working out well.
No, these things are long-term. And sometimes they have been cases in other bits of the world where PPPs have run into sort of sometimes difficult with the forecasts and estimates. But looking back, were there things that didn't go well, or generally were the numbers right? And
no. Look, we took a very conservative approach to the numbers, right? Now because we had spoken to many people around the world, and the guys in the UK we spoke a lot with as well. Yeah, because I still believe the UK was the forerunner when it came to what you guys call the PFIs or PPPs. So we had a lot of discussions with them. We learned not only from them, from other jurisdictions as well. Like, the Philippines we spoke to, for instance, the Australians we spoke to, and many other parts of the world. There were PPPs. Malaysia was another country that we visited and spoke to get, see what lessons we could learn. And the big thing is they told us to be careful about concessionaire bias. The concessionaire's optimism to say that the traffic will be realized as it is. Yeah. And that's when we learned to say, no, we will take care of this thing. A very conservative view. We knew what our economy was doing in South Africa. So if a concessionaire came to us and said there's going to be a 10% growth, when we knew that the growth will be about between 2 and 3%, we would say no to this guy. He's already got a -5 from us in adjudication. And especially if these guys came with -10, and there were some of the bidders would ask for sovereign support, because we did not support on our concessions with anybody, because we were confident that with a conservative approach using, and as again I said, touch wood, it has worked out that way, that the projects didn't run into trouble. When they said 10%, we said fine, We're quite happy to sit and talk to you about the kind of support that you're asking for, and see whether it is feasible for us to provide you with that support. But we believe that our view is that the traffic won't grow by, let's say that 3%, and that if it's going to be growing more than that, you can take the bonus, but we won't support you. We'll only support you. Not a single one took us on that offer, and we knew already that this was bias. But we were also warned against concessor, prime bias. That we were in our enthusiasm to make sure that we got the road, etc. We'd also believe the traffic will grow by 10%, and that's when we were told that rule of thumb. This is just a rule of thumb. See what your economy is growing at, and add 1% to it, to your traffic. So, our concessions are doing well. We've not had any problems with the viability of the concessions. But of course, there's always challenges. Because we had a formula in terms of adjusting our tariffs, for argument's sake, on an annual basis. And our colleagues from Mozambique for a couple of years didn't adjust the tariff. So we were always on our knees on the South African side, trying to give comfort to our concessionaire, this thing's not going belly up. And then one year, I couldn't believe what they did. One year they adjusted the tariffs, put what they call restore the economic balance of the concessionaire. And I thought, man, this is going to lead to problems with the public in Mozambique. Nothing. Not a word, not a squeak. The tariffs were adjusted. You sort of at one rand on one day, and the next day you were paying 7 rand or whatever it was, and everybody accepted it. But I think that also showed something, because the quality of the road compared to everything else that they had, and why you're paying for that particular service, and that's why I think we managed to get away with that. And there were, of course, occasionally, you have a disagreement, or then you say, between the concessionaire and the concessor. But what we wrote in the contracts that we did with the PPPs with what we call a rendezvous clause. Before we declare dispute with anybody, we had a group of people who needed to get together compulsorily. Contractually, you had to get together and see if you can thresh it out over there. And that worked out all the time. In the 30 years of all the concessions we've done, we've never had a dispute with the concession. We've managed to sort that out. So we have two sides to our business, the toll road side, and then, of course, we've got the non-toll road side, where we relied on government to do the budget, etc. And in my time at SANRAL, we grew the national road network. We did a whole lot of studies first. Let me take one step back. We did a whole lot of studies first in terms of what would constitute the primary road network of South Africa, and within that, the strategic road network. And we came out with, say, the primary network will be about 30,000 kilometers, 35 if memory serves me correctly, and about 25,000 kilometers of that would be the strategic network. And we started off when we were the agency with 6,800 kilometers. By the time I left, it was just over 22,000, I think 22,200 kilometers. We didn't set a timeline target for us in terms of building the network. What we had is that we used to produce it. We had a document, a 10-year vision for the agency that we called Horizon 2010 at that time. And then we did 2020, and then they continuing doing that. So we set out a 10-year horizon. But every year we had contractually with the government, we had to provide them with our business plan every year. But we didn't call it a business plan. Yeah, this was our intent, declaration of intent. And ministers and politicians would ask me, but where's your business plan? I said, here's my business plan. I said, what you're saying is only your intentions. I said, yeah, if you guarantee me how much money I'll get for the non-toll road budget, I will call it a business plan. Then I know I can undertake to deliver that. And that used to be a fairly sort of big joke amongst politicians, because every year, twice a year, we had to go and report to Parliament, to the Portfolio Committee, the Transport Portfolio Committee, and that's where we were doing that. And with our funders on the toll road side, also we used to do that every 2 years. Once when the budget was declared, and once when our annual report was published. So twice a year we used to do a round of all the financial institutions, or those who have been funding us and supporting us with the bond purchases, which we used to do every month within those limits, as I said, within those limits. So we used to go and do this twice. And we have other means and ways of keeping in touch, especially with the industry. But with the industry, we used to deliberately keep in touch, both let me take one step back again, Justin. We had the national roads covered the whole of South Africa. So we had offices in Cape Town, Pietermaritzburg, Port Elizabeth, and Pretoria. The head office was in Pretoria as well, or what I'd like to call the corporate office, as I used to call it. But the regional office was independent from the head office. They had their own offices, etc. So we had these 4 regional offices, as we call them. Yeah. And the regional managers were fairly independent of what they had to do, etc. And they reported directly to the engineering executive and to me. As I said, we had a very flat structure. The sort of senior personnel, if in business terms, there were 9 of us: 4 regional managers, the finance executive, the HR executive, the engineering executive, the company secretary, and me. So that was sort of the 9 of us, which constituted the hierarchy within SANRAL. Because, as I said, we had no organogram. Yeah. And I'll have to send you the picture of the organogram so you can understand what it was. But it was more of a Venn diagram that we had, with the 3 components of HR, finance, and engineering. And we could show very clearly that the room for error is very large if these 3 do not speak to each other. And that's the philosophy that we had adopted. Then we had a cluster system. Yeah. And all this, when we were talking about standards, etc., the clusters decided that. They would only come back to me if there was a disagreement with the grouping in the cluster. And there had to be a representative from each region in each cluster. So that's what it was. So that's what we did. And the way we set it up as well with the regions, right? We looked at the volume, the kilometers that each region will be looking after. But we also looked at the volume of traffic on these roads, on the volume on the traffic road, because then we knew that this is how, because we didn't draw up an organogram and said that we need X number of people. We grew the staff complement as and when we required, because as an agency, we had complete control over our hiring, etc., and so forth. And the only time the CEO or I as a CEO got involved if it was senior personnel that we were hiring, that I got involved in the hiring and the interview process. Otherwise, the regions did it with the HR executive, because my view was very simple. I'm not the one who's going to be working with these people directly that we're hiring. And they working, my regions are working, and the colleagues in the regions are working directly with them. So they got to get to know the person who they're hiring, not me. That's the way that we had structured SANRAL. Then within the clusters is where a whole lot of innovation and that came up. And we were very pleased that there was an independent assessment done with us and within the SADC region and elsewhere, that we were one of the top 5 agencies as far as asset management was concerned. We had a very sophisticated asset management system. And this is what I was saying. We built the national roads from 6,800 to 22,200 by the time I left. But a lot of this was done by not greenfield projects. These were brownfield roads that we were inheriting from the agent based on that study that we did, where we identified as to what is the strategic network and the primary road network, right? So the provinces were quite happy to do that. But at that point, Treasury was very naughty with us. They were very, very naughty. We used to inherit the roads, but the budget didn't come along with the roads. The usual government style. So the budget didn't come along with the roads. But that's where we did some very smart engineering. Some smart engineering, etc., where we prolonged the life of the pavements with what would call temporary measures, and then come back and do the full upgrade, etc., that we required. And at one time, we were one of the first in the world to have introduced a totally interoperable electronic toll collection system. Not a boom on site. It was over 500 lane kilometers that we had done this in Gauteng. And it was all done electronically. The traditional plazas that we had, where we still had the boom down operation, there too we introduced the ETC system, where you didn't have to stop to pay, as long as you had money on the stake. But I say all of these innovations, etc., came out of the clusters, because this is where the colleagues had an opportunity to decide for themselves as to what our future is, recognizing that we're moving away from just a provider of roads or road infrastructure to becoming a manager of services that we're going to be providing to the citizens of South Africa. And we also then, one of the, I should say, challenges of within the agency was that you hired a lot of experienced people. You didn't have room to train graduates coming out. We thought, no, man, we're providing, scholarships, etc. We need to do something about that. So we started to hire and take in graduates as well, new graduates coming into the agency, and we used to second them for both design experience or construction experience to contractors and consulting engineers. But we found with the consulting engineers, it was, if the heart of the person was not in training, this knowledge wasn't being transferred. It was becoming a challenge, one. Secondly, some of my colleagues were very, very naughty, as they thought because they're the client, now they can tell the consulting engineers what to do and that. And we had to sort that out. And then we just got fed up with that system over there, and we set up our own academy, training academy at SANRAL. And that's one of the things that I liked that we did, so that we could at least train the people. And this academy was run independent of us. We hired experienced people to run the academy for us, and they were running it properly for us. And one of the things that we used to do, that in the project, there were a couple of projects that we do in-house design. Because when we set up the agency, we did no in-house design, right? That's why you had all these very smart engineers and professionals working in the agency, right? But we didn't do any sort of basic design in that agency. But once we set up the academy, we did that. And then we used the graduates, the new graduates would do the design work, etc. And then we put that out to tender for consulting for two things. One for the RE, but also to review the designs. Yeah. And of course, preparing the tender documents for construction, etc. That's how we managed to start to give the necessary training for our graduates to become professional engineers or chartered engineers, whichever route that they chose. And a number of my former colleagues also went both the PR-Eng in South Africa and the C-Eng, up in the UK, because there's an agreement between the two countries in terms of recognition. So that's is the life at the agency. And then 18 and a half years later, there I was, out of it. And I must say that I adopted the simple philosophy. And I must say that when we faced a number of challenges, especially the Gauteng Freeway Improvement Project with this open road tolling system that we introduced. Yeah. There was a lot of opposition, unfortunately, both from within the governing party, yeah, to this, and of course the opposition who made use of this as a means of getting at government shortcomings for other reasons. So we didn't get the necessary support. But none of them could turn around and say that they didn't know about it. Because I told you earlier that we used to go to Parliament every year. And with this declaration of intent that we always had, and in our horizon document, we put down already which roads we believe that we were going to toll, what the costing would be at that time, our estimate of the cost for that time. And we used to make it very clear when we used to present to Parliament that we are going to be tolling these roads in this year or that. And this is what we're doing to the GFOP. And nobody could deny the fact that they didn't know. And then, of course, as things are in South Africa, we are a constitutional democracy, and I had no problems with people taking us to court. But the opposition lost all the time, and twice in the Constitutional Court as well. That's the highest court in our land. And what was said for me is that even business as well, you found that business on the one side was supporting you through buying your bonds and all of these things, but they didn't like the toll road. So it's a contradiction over there. But we understand that society is not homogeneous. So today you and I will agree on something. Tomorrow you and I will have a disagreement on something. We won't agree with the thing. Yeah. So I used to accept the view that society is not homogeneous, and these are the things that we will face. But what was said for me personally is that even after the Constitutional Court ruling in our favor, the opposition carried on, and the opposition was supported both by within the governing party and the opposition parties themselves, and became a huge political thing, huge political issue in South Africa. It's still not resolved today, yeah. But like I tell people, I enjoyed my time when I was at SANRAL, and I enjoy being retired. Yeah, I don't talk to SANRAL unless my colleagues call me. We'll go for lunch, we'll go for dinner and things like that. We'll do all of those things, but we will not talk work. I don't talk about SANRAL because I don't want to be seen to be ruling from the grave. Simple as that. Yeah. That's the story, Justin. As far as SANRAL in my working life is concerned.
Thank you for listening. The second episode is available from Transport Talks and takes a global view on the road industry, the next part of this conversation with Nazir. Thank you for listening.
Joining a professional body has never been more important. Join thousands of other professionals just like you who are getting ahead with CIHT membership. Go to the CIHT website and discover exclusive resources and why the leaders and future leaders of the sector are members with CIHT.